Welcome everyone to the CMMC in action, our level 1 mock assessment. We have our players are ready to assume the role as organization seeking assessment and the assessor roles. So we're going to have a good time today within this hour. We're going to get a lot of value, hopefully, where we're going to demonstrate not just telling you what the requirements are, but demonstrate how to satisfy the requirements, giving you just examples, practical examples that you can leverage either in your organization or as you're consulting for other defense contractors. Let's get into it. I got to do a disclaimer. Our attorneys require this and let you know this is a mock assessment, even though we are using practical examples and real world examples of how to achieve CMMC level 1 compliance. This is still for informational training purposes only. Even though I am a lead CMMC certified assessor, I'm not your lead assessor. So you need to recommend either you look at the assessment guides, scoping guides, or hire a consultant like myself or Edgar or Evan to come in and help create a program that's going to help you comply with your requirements. All right, now we got the legalese out of the way. Let's continue. So a little bit about us, Aspire Cyber. We specialize in CMMC readiness. My wife and I started Aspire Cyber a little over 3 years ago, and we've been really focusing on CMMC readiness about 2 years now. And an exciting journey. And since the CMMC program rule was published in October, we've gotten a lot more activity where clients that were kind of waiting on the sidelines, now they're pulling the trigger and making the investments because they know that CMMC is real. It's not going anywhere. And yeah, we have to get into action. Enough talk. Actually have to implement the requirements. So that really is our goal with this series, is kind of pull people together, whether it's consultants, defense contractors, and really empower those defense contractors by demonstrating the how. There's no shortage of training and webinars about what the requirements are. However, we wanted to put more of a practical, actionable series together to demonstrate the how. And that's why I'm relying on volunteers like Evan and Edgar to boldly volunteer to help and demonstrate. So I think that's the best way to learn, is to actually do it versus just reading all day. So putting it into action, that's what you all are going to see today. The tools we'll be using today to actually perform the assessment and track whether the requirements are met or not met. We're going to be using CMMC Proof, which is a tool that was developed by Aspire Cyber. It is our compliance acceleration system. And basically what differentiates CMMC Proof from other GRC tools is we incorporate project management into the tool and really focus on guiding the defense contractor through each phase of the compliance journey, making sure that they're following all of the steps, because a lot of times with our clients, when we first start working with them, they may say, yeah, we've completed let's say CMMC level 1 mock assess or self-assessment, but they hadn't done any scoping, they hadn't done any pre-assessment work. So we want to make sure you're following the steps, because we don't want our clients wasting time or money. As far as the polls, we're going to be doing a poll after each domain and getting audience feedback. So you don't get to fully sit back and relax. We're going to at least ask you to participate in the polls. And you're going to provide feedback on whether you feel that the OSA has met the requirements. So it's going to be if you think they've met it or not met. And then lastly, as far as chat, certainly post your questions and feedback throughout the presentation. And at the end, we're going to try to reserve at least 10 minutes for Q&A. So at that point, you can come off of mute and just open discussion, ask questions, give feedback. And we'll have that dialogue. But I do ask that you're not talking, stay on mute, and then during the assessment, just so you don't disrupt the flow of the assessment, try to save your questions that you want to come off and you can ask towards the end for the Q&A. That is kind of our housekeeping rules. Let's jump into the actual CMMC level 1 self-assessment, give you an overview of the CMMC level 1 requirements. So what's in scope for a CMMC level 1 self-assessment is going to be any systems that processes, stores, or transmits federal contract information, FCI. So at level 1, we're only focused on FCI. Level 2 is the CUI. Level 1 is FCI, and all other assets are out of scope. If an asset, let's say a printer, let's say, for example, the printer is on a separate VLAN, it doesn't print FCI, then that printer is out of scope. However, if you have a laptop that's processing, storing, and transmitting FCI, then guess what? That laptop is in scope. Or even worse, if you have employees who are using their personally owned devices to access FCI, their mobile devices or their own personal laptops or MacBooks, then that brings their devices into scope for this self-assessment. I typically advise against that. You want to reduce the scope as much as possible, but we'll see how it plays out today during our fictitious company, see how they're handling it. In requirements, there are 15 requirements for level 1. They map directly to the FAR clause, so FAR 21. And then it also that's mirrored in the CMMC level 1 self-assessment guide. You also can find it in the NIST SP 800-171. But what I like most about the CMMC assessment guides is they incorporate 2 documents essentially. If you just look at the NIST documents, you have the NIST SP 800-171. You have to look at the NIST 800 assessment guide, which is a separate document, to get a full picture of the requirements. But if you download the CMMC assessment guide, then you'll get all 15 requirements and the corresponding assessment objectives. All right, so as far as once CMMC starts showing up in solicitations, if you're a defense contractor and you have that clause in your contract, then there's going to be an affirming official, which needs to be a senior level representative who will be attesting annually to the Department of Defense. They're going to be submitting that attestation in SPURS, and it has to be a senior level representative. It can't be Bob or Sally from IT. It has to be someone senior level that's saying, yes, our organization has met all of these 15 requirements. Plan of action and milestones. You can't have a POAM for level 1. Not permitted. That means that once you do your self-assessment, then you have to meet all 15 requirements. If you haven't met those requirements, then technically you're not qualified for that solicitation. So you have to meet all requirements. And then self-assessment artifacts must be retained for 6 years, or whatever artifacts that you produced and as you're doing your self-assessment, you have to retain those for 6 years. For example, if the DoD comes 3 years later after you submitted that self-attestation of compliance and for whatever reason wants to audit you or assess you, then they want to see that evidence. However, as you're doing your self-assessment, you don't have to show evidence or you don't have to submit evidence into SPURS when you're submitting your self-attestation annually. So you'll see as we're doing this mock assessment, I'm not going to be asking our Edgar and Evan to show evidence. We're pretty much just kind of talking through the requirements. However, it is absolutely a best practice to have evidence and documentation as you're doing that internal self-assessment, but it's not a requirement that you submit that to DoD to validate your attestation. Last but not least, all objectives must be met in order for the security requirement to be considered fully implemented. So you'll see as we're going through doing an assessment, there's a requirement. So I think of it as the parent level. You have the corresponding assessment objectives. That's pretty much how you're objectively validating that you have satisfied the requirement. A lot of times I see with our new clients, they've done a self-assessment, but they've only looked at the requirements. They didn't look at the assessment objectives. And it's no way you can accurately determine if that requirement is met without looking at the corresponding assessment objectives. And with that being said, let's say, for example, if there's a requirement that has 6 assessment objectives and you meet 5 of the 6, guess what? That requirement is not met. You need to meet all 6. All right. So now I'll stop talking and introduce. I want you to meet our players for today. So starting with Edgar.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edgar Vanterpool. I'm a business information security officer for Compliancy. Been doing GRC, cybersecurity / IT infrastructure for the last 8-9 years. Very happy to be here. I'm gonna hand it over to Evan now.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me. I'm Evan Dumichel. I'm the founder of North Star Strategies. I've worked in the managed services space for about 15 plus years, and then most recently in an executive role as the VP of Operations. And so my goal is to help people find the connection between their technology and the practical business applications of it, with a specific focus on CMMC these days. And just shout out to Edgar. I've had a really nice time working with you, man.
Awesome. And then the assessment team. So typically I am just the event organizer, the MC. However, with the holidays, we had some last minute drops where people had some conflicts that had previously signed up to be on the assessment team. So I'm wearing two hats today. I'm going to be on the assessment team, leading the assessment, asking the probing questions.
Where's the separation of duties there?
Yeah, but duty call. Man. I gotta do what I gotta do. We'll see how it works out. But with that being said, certainly the invitation's open for anyone who wants to come and participate. Yeah, I like using the phrase "come play with us." So if you're when you're serving the roles of OSA or assessment team, you don't need to have CMMC experience. I'll definitely prior to the mock assessment, I'll provide you much resources and guidance to help you prepare. But yeah, just come have fun. Let's talk through these requirements. It's nothing scary, so I invite you all to sign up and also stick around to the end. We're going to be sharing how you can access some bonuses that you're going to get by being one of the live attendees. Okay, well, let's get into overview as far as the assessment plan. So during a real assessment, let's say if an organization at level 1 does hire a company like Aspire Cyber to come in and do their self-assessment for them, what we would do is after we gather the information we need, like their just general information about their company, and once we kick off the assessment, we'll do an in brief. We'll give them an overview. Okay, here are the assessors, outline what the process is going to be, and then let them know how we're going to evaluate the requirements. And during this time, hopefully our goal is to try to reduce their stress. No one likes to be assessed or audited. We want to reduce their stress levels and just get them ready for the assessment. So these are the domains that's included in level 1 and the corresponding assessment objectives. And then following the assessment, we'll do an out brief, let them know what were our findings and provide any clarifications if necessary. Okay, so Edgar and Evan are back up. They're going to tell us about our fictional defense contractor.
All right. Edgar, do you want me to start off, or do you want to tell a little bit about Edgar Evans Systems?
You start off.
All right. Cool. So Edgar Evans Systems makes specialized gaskets and seals for military vehicles. We work on custom designed seals for armored vehicles, making sure that they operate well in extreme conditions. We are not dealing with any CUI explicitly. We're only dealing with FCI. The kinds of FCI we're getting from the primes are going to be statements of work, details of the project requirements, and our deliverables are going to be documentation and reports related to the manufacturing process. Our scope is going to be including our PreVeil enclave, in which all of our FCI resides, workstations, which access, as in view, that FCI, and we've also hardened our local network environment to make sure that anything in transit is also protected with encryption. Edgar, you want anything else?
We do have a separate environment from our commercial unit that does communicate to this to the actual PreVeil. So commercial users that don't need access to FCI won't be able to access it. Pretty much our network is segmented from our commercial environment, separate from an FTP server if something needs to be transferred over after stringent approval process.
And I don't know if I heard you mention, but how many employees do you have?
It was about 50.
50? Okay.
But not all 50 access FCI.
Right.
Okay. Segment. How many would you say probably access FCI?
Say, a quarter of that 15? Not much.
Okay, cool. All right. Excellent. See? All right. Can y'all see the assessment tool?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's jump into it. So for ACL1, V1.I, so authorized access control. So explain to me, how are you all authorizing access control? And they kind of gave me a high level overview just for now, but let's elaborate on that more. How are you limiting system access to authorized users for those systems that process, store, or transmit FCI?
Would you like for me to go, Evan?
Yeah, sure. I've got our SSP in front of me too, so we can just sort of high five and hand off whenever you want to.
All right, sweet. We utilize Active Directory and RBAC and configured with OUs specifically for FCI.
And with that, he's speaking specifically back to what y'all mentioned earlier in the beginning. We're speaking to A, as in what is necessary for identification in this case. Authorized users are identified. And so from that perspective, authorized users are identified in the OU associated with FCI.
And so that OU, is that Microsoft, like Active Directory?
Active Directory.
Yes. Okay, directory. And is that the commercial version?
No, enterprise. So yes, so we have it separated for particular groups and policies that pertain to FCIs and hardened to STIG and SCAP regulations.
Okay, and I think you sent me your SSP prior to me showing up on site. And I saw a mention of GCC. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay. All right. Can you tell us more about just the difference between the GCC and the commercial, and more importantly, like, so I know you're using Prevail. What was the decision to use GCC and Prevail?
We wanted to make sure that in the event of any kind of spillage, we were still protected. So we've got administrative controls to make sure that no FCI is making its way into the GCC environment. But we've also got DLP and other just primarily good cyber hygiene rules in our GCC.
Yeah, that's awesome, especially for level one. Just for the audience, so for CMMC level one FCI, you can store FCI in commercial for Microsoft. However, they're using the government community cloud version, which is just a higher level of security, and it also the data centers are all within the U.S. And then in addition to that, they're using Prevail, which is you can store up to ITAR and the CUI in Prevail. And that Prevail is hosted on AWS Gov Cloud. Some strong processes and IT infrastructure in place to make sure they're securing that FCI. So above and beyond C processes. As far as processes, how are you identifying which processes each user has, each user account? And then how are you tracking those processes?
Want me to go? All right.
Yeah.
We start off with the hiring process with HR that works with the actual hiring manager and then the information owner. Then they'll be able to fill out a form that gives the appropriate or the accurate groups that the user needs to be applied to inside of an Active Directory unit. And then from there, the system administrator will test and implement and test their access controls on top of their newly configured PC for FCI.
Yeah. And then from a programmatic process perspective, all users are limited to standard users on their workstations and via the ADOU, and any processes that are going to be running elevated processes, let's say a backup or something to that nature, will have a unique process running it so that when we look at our audits, we can be sure we understand what, when, and how that particular process was being run.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. And one thing, just kind of backtrack again. Can you all explain what's your role in the organization? Like, what's your title? I don't know if I've missed that or not.
Sure. I'm the VP of operations at the organization.
Yep.
Right.
And I'm the business information security officer. So he's over me. We facilitate the infrastructure, cybersecurity, the internal awareness or cybersecurity awareness, the change board process, and then the infrastructure.
Okay.
We have 2 system administrators and an MSSP that assist with our program.
Thanks for calling that out. Yes.
Great. Yeah. We have a solid team. I'm happy to see we have senior leadership showing up and participating.
Edgar let me know how important it was. He said I was the guy who had to sign on the dotted line.
Sign the check. Definitely. All right. And you're the affirming official. So
that's what I mean. Yeah, I got to know how it works.
You want to make sure that
let's make sure that this webinar gets outside the echo chamber to other people in executive roles to make sure they understand that they are the ones who have to be the affirming official in this scenario.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. So moving on to the next one, transaction and function control. How are you all managing transaction and functions within your environment?
There we are. You're on L1B1.
Edgar, you want to go for it?
What type of transaction function authorized permitted? Give me 1 second.
And kind of give some more context around that. Let's say transaction function. So someone, let's say maybe a standard user account, an admin account, a maintenance account. So really just giving that context for the audience.
Yeah, I think I sort of glossed over this one on the most recent statement, actually. So we're using a SIM to log our data, and we have any kind of elevated activity or access on a workstation is going to be flagged in the SIM. And then for transactions, we're utilizing logging on the Active Directory server, as well as using an agent on the workstations to transmit those logs from the workstation up to the SIM. And all users are limited to standard users. And then, like I mentioned earlier, any kind of backup processes or things of that nature, if it's going to be running in any kind of automated way, like a backup at 2 a.m., that's going to be running through a unique account that's specifically for that purpose. So if it were to run anything else at any other time, we would know it.
Here's the sweet part about it. That would be service accounts that's already predetermined, that's pre-approved through the change board process in the Active Directory unit. And then on top of the end user PC, they don't have a local admin. So even if somebody has // computer name and try to brute force into the local admin. It's not there. So it requires the system administrator to work with the MSSP to log into the PC physically or desktop area.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So one thing they're doing that's really good and you want to do during your assessment is they're providing information kind of in advance of other questions they know that are coming. And it helps me as the assessor really not have to ask those questions again. They already provided me substantial information that exceeds what's in this example right here, but they also covered some of these just with some of those statements. Yes. Another thing to point out with transactions, function, processes, often what I see overlooked when we're doing assessments is the defense contractors, they may not think about those backup processes or automated processes and service accounts. So you want to make sure you need to have those documented and tracking those, right?
Monique, if it's possible for you to mute, that would be helpful. You got it, or she got it. Somebody got it.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So next we need to, typically I would be going through marking this met or not met based on the information they provided or artifacts. But since we are involving the audience with the polls, we're going to let you determine if you feel that they have met the requirements. Okay. So far, so good. Next up, the external connections. This one can be a tough one for a lot of organizations. But yeah, explain to me, how are you managing the external connections to your FCI system?
Sure. Edgar, you want to kick us off first?
Oh, you lead the way on this one.
Okay. So we're managing this in a couple of different ways. So we are doing certificate-based controls to access the FCI environment. So by that we mean there's going to be a certificate that has to be installed by an administrator manually to even gain access to that environment. Beyond that, we're also doing MAC address control. And so we're implementing MAC address control to make sure that anything that needs to access our FCI environment is going to be whitelisted. And then we're also using FIPS validated VPN with MFA for any kind of really, truly external connections. Like if someone, this is further down the line, but let's say we needed, and actually I think it's a level 2 thing, but let's say we needed to perform maintenance from an external location. We would need to make sure that that was authorized via the MAC address 2FA on the VPN connection, and then that individual could do that task.
Anything else you want to add on this one, Edgar?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have, hold on, I'm going to add, we do have particular firewalls that monitor the ports.
Yes.
That when to speak upon the MAC addresses, it's hardening the switch to where, like, let's say we have an end user that has an FCI PC and you have a commercial user. The commercial user couldn't just automatically just go plug into that port because that port is shut off just for that particular MAC address and that particular VLAN for that particular device for FCI. So it's predefined via the switch and the firewall.
Okay.
Yeah. And put simply for the wider audience, you have the option in a scenario like this, whether it's going to be a connection or an application, to whitelist or blacklist. What we've chosen to do is whitelist, leaning more towards zero trust. We say yes to very few things instead of saying no to a lot of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, you're anticipating my next question. I was going to ask you to elaborate the difference between the whitelist and blacklist. And to your point, it's easier to identify, okay, what devices are allowed versus trying to think of every device or process or app that's not allowed.
Right. Because that list is going to grow forever.
Yeah. And I know in revision 3 for 80171, yeah, they kind of explicitly are moving towards whitelisting.
Yeah.
Blacklisting. However, we know for CMMC level 2, it is 80171 revision 2. Okay. The next one, so the last requirement in the access control domain is control public information. So how are you stopping employees from posting FCI on your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Snapchat, TikTok? What's your process for making sure that doesn't happen?
We've worked through this pretty extensively. And for everybody out, it's a challenge. So you need to work largely with administrative controls. But what we've done to address this is we've got a media protection policy that goes through our change control board, and that details the approval process and any disciplinary actions for either side of posting. For example, if it does get posted, the staff needs to know and sign off on the disciplinary actions associated with that. And also we provide monthly insider threat trainings to our staff to make sure they get what the issue would be and why it would be an issue. And then we also have a defined process for our leadership and management teams to run through removing FCI from our own socials, as well as employees via internal requests and escalations to public authorities if internal requests are not heeded. And that would be like, in extreme cases, CISA, FBI, etc.
I would say that's a pretty robust, comprehensive policy. As I was reading through SSP, I was impressed when it said monthly training. It's hard to get a lot of...
that was Edgar.
It's hard to get a lot of companies to do annual training, let alone monthly. So that's really impressive.
Yep.
For level 2, just to give you all an example for the audience, I would want to, as maybe a follow-up or a request for evidence or artifact, I would ask to see their training records to show, okay, that they actually are following that policy. And it's really important, especially at level 2, where you have to have evidence, is anything that's in your policy, make sure you're doing that.
And just so y'all are... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Edgar.
I was going to say our evidence would have been the team's records, the team's attendance, or a SharePoint training that we would have provided every month, that they would have either went to C-STEP or some type of internal CDSE that we would have completed for them.
Excellent.
And then just as for people here who need to get these kinds of resources, the CISA website has a free rebrandable insider threat training PowerPoint. If you don't even know where to start with that, you can start there and then run through that on a monthly all hands, for example, and that would help you with that process.
Yeah, great example. And there's lots of free information and training out there. You don't have to go pay for a tool or solution. Training.
It does not have to be monthly. We do it because of our size.
Yeah.
Good practice.
Judge accordingly.
And some other things I want to highlight that you all pointed out was the disciplinary actions. So in your policy, you need to have, okay, what are the consequences if there are, especially if it's blatant posting of FCI? What are disciplinary actions? And then most importantly as well is what is you see for the assessment objectives. Again, why the assessment objectives are so important is you have mechanisms in place to remove and address improper posting. So you can say, yes, we have a process in place to prevent public posting of FCI. But okay, if you do determine FCI is posted, what do? You follow your incident response plan? What's your process? So I see this missed a lot. Gap assessments for our clients. I don't know what they would do if they find it. They just say, oh, it never happens. But okay, if it does happen, or if it happens.
And that doesn't have to be super scary either, because a lot of CMMC, you'll hear a lot, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up to you, the organization, to define the parameters and what works for your organization. The important part is that you define it, and then you follow the action that you've defined, that you've thought about it and put this thing in place, whether it is the incident response or the disciplinary actions or how many passwords you're going to save for history that can't be reused and stuff like that. It's largely up to the organization. You just have to make sure that you've thought about it and you're doing what you said you were going to do.
Exactly.
And it's funny you said that about the posting. Like literally we have a policy to where you can't take pictures in certain areas, and it's branded throughout our building. It's highly publicized, no pictures.
And reinforced.
So there's no excuse if it gets posted, because in the workplace, since we're a manufacturing plant, like even though we make the smallest of seals, the machines are 20 times our size. So safety comes first.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be on your phone while you're operating machinery anyways.
Absolutely. And Evan, I see someone in the chat asked about that website for the training. So if you have access to that now, you put it in the chat. Otherwise,
maybe I can multitask real quick. Give me a second.
All right, so that covers the access control requirements. There's 4 for level 1. So now, our audience, it's time to put them to work. Put them on the get some feedback from our audience. So let's launch the poll. See if I can do this right. Launch and let me know if y'all can see it. The poll.
I do not see a poll.
All right, so launch name, results. Okay, I did get 2. I got at least 1. Is anyone else seeing the poll? I see 2 responses. So someone else.
I saw it pop up, then it disappeared.
Oh, it disappered. All right. Okay,
There it
Keith
goes.
says he see it.
Okay.
All right, and if you don't see the poll, just
That's
put yes, no, or I don't know as far, because we're asking we believe that Evan and Edgar demonstrated that they've met the 4 requirements for access control. Their organization has met the requirements. Yes, no, or I don't know. And if you have anything else you want to add to it, just put it in the chat. We'll try to address that during the Q&A.
And while y'all are doing that, my actual org policy on my real Teams environment disallows me from chatting in a meeting hosted by external parties.
There you go. It works.
Derek, I'm going to send you
Send it to me.
just a link.
I'll throw it in next break I get. But yeah, so far, like we have 5 responses and 100% says, yes, y'all have met the requirements. So you're off to a good start. So far, so good. Let's keep the streak going. The next domain we have for level 1 is going to be identification and authentication. And you'll see a lot of these requirements do overlap. So these are kind of some are going to overlap with access control. But let's explain to me how you're identifying system users, processes, acting on behalf of those users and devices.
Well,
Yeah.
no, you go ahead.
Come on, Evan. No,
Yeah.
we got to continue the streak, Evan.
I think personally that this item has largely been discussed a little bit when we mentioned backups and separate OUs for system users and things of that nature. But Edgar, if you wanted to dive in deeper to that, you're certainly welcome to.
Yeah, we have our process via hiring with HR, hiring managers, information owners, and production managers. But other than that is backed up by 80 user list. Our users are assigned their own computers with their own asset tags. And then the tags are stored in Prevail, and the devices are stored in Prevail for the ones that access FCI. And then IT stores their own asset tags for their commercial units.
And can you elaborate more as far as how Prevail works? You mentioned that each device has like a certificate to access Prevail.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little more? So if one of your employees just tries to go to Prevail website and log in, would that work if it's not a Prevail device?
No, it wouldn't work. They wouldn't be able to access it. And we've got it locked down to access in 2 ways. First is a certificate. So you generate a unique certificate that can only be installed by an administrative user on a workstation. And there's a handshake between the workstation certificate and the Prevail environment. If it doesn't have the certificate, it's not going to be able to access it. We've also chosen to whitelist the Prevail environment to our office's public IP. So you can only access it from within the office or virtually within the office if you're authorized to connect over VPN and then bounce up to Prevail.
All right. That sounds like a good illustration of defense in depth to me. Excellent. All right. Let's keep it moving. So now we're looking at authentication. So how are you authenticate or verify the identities of those users, processes, or devices? Kind of, again, there's overlap with the access control. So you covered that already, but anything else you want to add for this one?
Yes.
Edgar implemented IdenTrust if you want to talk through that.
Yeah. So it works through Active Directory, and each FCI user will have a specific identified token for them to use when they're logging into the PC itself.
Okay. So is that a hardware token?
Yes, sir.
Hardware token. Okay. All right. So
Yeah, we kept it hardware tokens to keep away from the bring your own device. So we don't have anything that can be man in the middle attacked or something can be spoofed.
okay.
So unless you physically have the token, you physically know the password, and you physically have the PC, also you have physical access to the network or VLAN or the actual port that IP MAC address or IP address belongs to, 5-6 different ways that you're securing the environment.
Okay. Yeah. Those clear boundaries. And although multi-factor authentication is not required at level 1, it is required at level 2. Have that covered. So just to confirm, so if there is someone on their company issued laptop, if they've lost their, what was it called again? Sorry to do it.
The hardware key, the IdenTrust hardware key.
They lost their hardware key. They wouldn't be able to log into their laptop.
No, they would not. They would have to call customer service, either call customer service so they can, or email in the ticket, or they can't email the ticket because they locked it at a computer. They'll have to reach out to supervisor manager, and then from there, the proper reporting will happen. That IdenTrust token will be terminated and moved out of the system, and actually logged, moved into a different OU stating that is deactivated. A report will be generated for that loss or that incident that happened, and a new IdenTrust token will be generated once the user comes back into the system with the proper administrative rights from the system admin and proper validation from the MSSP stating that that system is completely down, is not applicable anymore. It can't be used in our environment.
All right. Got it. So that brings us, so that completes this domain for IA, verification of authentication. So let's go back to our audience and see what they think as far as you all satisfied the requirements. You should see the poll popping up now. Did Edgar Edgar Evans, systems satisfy the IA requirements. We have 6 responses so far. We do have 1 response that I don't know. The vast majority are saying, yes, you all satisfy. Majority wins. Okay, let's keep the streak going. So for media protection, we only have 1 requirement for media protection. Discuss how you all are handling media protection and regarding sanitization and making sure you're sanitizing the FCI off of devices prior to reuse.
This was a tough one to get past with the leadership team, but what we've decided to do is to not repurpose the hard drives of any machines that had access to FCI. That doesn't mean we can't repurpose the shell of the computer, like the RAM, the processor, things of that nature. But what we've chosen to do is to pull the hard drive of any machine that is going to be repurposed and replace that hard drive. And then we sanitize that hard drive that we pulled via a third-party service that degosses and destroys the machine and provides a certificate of destruction for each serial number.
We do not put it in the microwave. We have certificate of destructions for all our hard drives.
Okay, excellent. And just for the audience sake, what was the challenge as far as getting this approved by senior leadership? What obstacles did you run into? How did you overcome those obstacles?
I'll speak
Good
to
question.
that one. Cost.
Yeah,
One
that's a
word.
common one.
The reason why, because they're looking at efficiency. Can't we just wipe it 3-4 times with a special tool that right over it? Yes, we can, but then you run the risk of somebody missing a step or skipping a procedure, and then that FCI could probably be left on that device. So we took a calculated risk of how much would it cost the business itself if FCI got out of the business. Would it cost a reputation, fines, equipment, jail time for senior leadership? Evan,
I weighed the options. I decided I didn't want to do that. Yeah, we can spend the $60 on the new hard drive.
Yeah, I heard the food's not that good in prison, so Evan, I think you made a good decision. All right, but that's an excellent example of doing a risk assessment and making determine, okay, what's the return on investment, what's the cost benefit analysis.
Yeah,
Glad y'all were able to convince leadership that it was going
we was able to take an offensive approach on that. We was able to get with the contractor and actually have them pay for the hard drives, part of maintenance for life cycle, device life cycle policy or process.
Yeah, that's a good example of how you can reduce those costs and potentially even make a profit off of it. And someone, Gene asked about, for the third party who does this destruction, do they have to be CMMC certified? In some intercessor role, I'll take that one. No, they don't. They don't have to be certified. However, just depending on their process, what they have access to, that may bring them into scope for your level 2 assessment. So where they may need to be available to answer some questions or provide some artifacts, evidence to satisfy the assessor line of questioning that they don't have access to that FCI. So in this case, where they are getting those drives that did previously have, so going back, context level 2 and level 1, so they had access to the FCI, then yeah, you want to make sure you have a certificate of destruction. Also do your due diligence on that third party provider, see what certifications do they have, there's ISO or SOC, and make sure you're doing your due diligence is a good best practice.
Shout out to due diligence, because so if y'all are going through this process and you're having all of these conversations about your internal systems, someone like Derek will definitely come in and start asking about the third-party providers. And so you should be collecting a customer responsibility matrix of what they're responsible for and what you're responsible for, particularly for level 2. Derek can speak to whether that would be required for level 1. But it's going to be really important for the assessor and for you to understand the clear lines between what you're responsible for and that third party is responsible for.
So as far as, I'm not sure if I set that up yet. So we'll skip this poll close to time, but now let's jump on to, but I would say, in my opinion, they did have met the requirement for media protection. The certificate of destruction, the process, how they were able to convince leadership. So yeah, good job. Moving on to the physical protection. So explain to me what FCI is in scope as far as physical FCI that you have and how you're securing that FCI, making sure that only authorized individuals have access to that FCI in your organization.
We chose to create a separate section of the office. So we have a keycard system that gains access to the main office. We've got a receptionist, 2 receptionists at any given time at the desk for the escort purposes, which is a later control. And then to your specific question, we have a separate area of the office in which any laptops that would be displaying FCI are going to be working in, or desktops, and they have a secondary key card that only a specific OU of FCI authorized users, which is attached to our Active Directory, are able to access that environment, and that is logged within the HRIS system.
Okay. And as far as visitors, how are you managing visitors?
Edgar, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So we do have a logging process, and the reason why management decided on 2 receptionists is because we feel that the receptionist should escort the person to their designated location, while the other receptionist covers the front desk, just in case if somebody else comes in and picks up the phone.
Yep. And additionally, there's a buzzer system from the waiting room into the main area. So if there's ever a scenario where the front desk is not staffed at that exact moment, because for whatever reason, both receptionists are away from the desk at that given time, then the visitor's going to have to wait in the waiting room until they get buzzed in.
And they have to show 2 forms of identification before they actually enter the premise. Hopefully they show it beforehand, so it makes the process a whole lot quicker. But typically they have to name who they're visiting and show 2 forms of identification.
So as far as like with your badges, keys to any access to any of the physical locations that store FCI, what's the tracking system?
Well, go ahead.
No, you got it.
Elaborate a little bit more on tracking system.
For example, as far as physical CUID, are you have any office where it's stored and you're locking that office with a key or a file cabinet or?
Yes, we have a clean desk policy.
Okay.
So we have a clean desk policy for that. Behind the doors, behind the designated FCI office area, we have the clean desk policy with that. And then you said logging. What was the other question you asked?
As far as like the keys. So if
So that's monitored by our IT system administrators via the logs on there and our MSSP.
And then I was looking through our SSP. Helpful to have your SSP all when you forget the name of something. So the name of the tool that we're using for the keycard management system is called ID Manager. It's by HID Global. And so keeps a log of access and who's accessing what areas, as well as providing access to certain areas. So like that's why there's a second group that would only be able to get in the server room or the FCI area. And then to Edgar's point, even if an authorized person accesses it at 11 p.m., well, what are you doing at 11 p.m.? And so that attempt would be logged and notified the MSSP. It wouldn't actually open the door, but we would know that there was a potential insider threat or their key card was compromised.
Okay.
We did fail to mention earlier, the reason why we have an IT system administrator is for day-to-day functions, and the MSSPs also for backup for 24/7 also.
Okay. All right. Let's launch the poll for the physical security requirements. What do y'all think? What did Evan and Edgar do? They satisfy them, and keep in mind, obviously, if we're doing a self-assessment and they're bringing in the third party, I'm going to be asking more probing questions, but due to time, we're kind of glossing over it high level. However, one thing that they're doing really well is from an assessor standpoint, they clearly know what they're talking about. They're clearly following the policies and procedures. So that's going to invite less questions. That's going to make the assessor feel more assured that, okay, these guys know what they're doing. They're legit. Versus if every question I'm asking, they're like, I don't know, let me check. I'm not sure. Then that's going to invite a lot more questions. All right. So let's see. As far as the poll, what do we have so far? 100%. All right. Y'all got that streak going. Let's go. All right. And I'll go to the next one. Gene asked about what is a clean desk policy. Y'all want to elaborate that one?
So a clean desk policy is where you should be able to pick up your PC or your laptop and be able to work from any desk or cubicle or office in the building. So you don't have any documentation laying around. You don't have personal effects. You don't have things that wouldn't be movable or scalable throughout the building or infrastructure. So for instance, you have a docking station, your keyboard, your mouse, your 2 monitors or 3 monitors as I have, and then you just plug and play. So you should be highly mobile.
Additionally, any FCI, physical FCI, let's say someone printed the SOW that was provided to us, that we have a 0 tolerance policy for that being in view on your desk. There's a requirement to lock with a key that only you have access to. Any information that is physical before you leave. We do the classic pattern recognition, hiding, and things of that nature from a password perspective and a screen perspective. And if y'all have been through a process like this before, you already know the answer to this, but oftentimes your maintenance staff, your overnight maintenance staff, for example, falls within scope because you might put your physical thing, your physical FCI in the trash can instead of appropriately shredding it and sanitizing that media, or not locking a drawer. And you have to remember that anybody who has access to your environment can potentially fall in scope if they can view, transmit, or process, even in their brain, FCI. So it's just important to think about that.
Absolutely. All right, so moving on to the boundary for system and communication protection. I'm really confident on all of what you provided up to this point, that you've already kind of covered all of these to my satisfaction. So let's move on to public access system separation. Are you implementing sub networks for publicly accessible system components?
I think we spoke to a little bit of this earlier. The long and the short of it is there's no such thing as a publicly accessible component in our environment. We've got access to our FCI environment whitelisted to our Office IP, as well as protected by MFA and that certification on the workstations. And there's no external access into the environment unless it's protected by a FIPS validated encryption on our VPN that's also protected via MFA. And only users authorized by Edgar actually are going to be allowed to gain VPN access.
So
Excellent.
long story short, you could remote in from home using your actual PC through the VPN, through using your token, authenticate through our Active Directory to actually access that information. But you have to have one of Edgar Evans' PC or assets to access that.
Clear boundary protection, clearly. So this is one way you can approach it. You can either mark that as NA, since they don't have any publicly accessible systems, or you can mark it as MET and just explain, okay, this is how we meet that requirement. Typically, if you're doing a level 2, a safer way to do it is to say MET and then just explain why, how you're meeting it, versus NA that may invite more scrutiny. Either or is
I was just going to say that anytime that there's a requirement, if you can create a policy and procedure around that to state it in your company documentation, there is none and here's how there is none, and then you can call it MET instead of not applicable. That's what Derek just said.
A good artifact would be like your topology or your network diagram showing the VLANs on how it connects to the firewall, how it connects to the external VPN, and then how it comes in from wherever you're connecting to through the asset.
Yep. All right, so we'll close out the assessment with with the system information integrity, antivirus, and so forth. So how are you all detecting and remediating flaws?
All right.
I know that Edgar had a passion for this section when we were talking. If you want to start, man, go for it.
All right. We have a patch management procedure, patch management policy, and procedures that document detailed updates within the Windows timeline. See previous answer regarding so we actually do vulnerability scans every 3 weeks. We do patching, or we do a weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual, and annual audit of our environment. So the weekly, you'll do it 4 times. The monthly, you'll do it once in the time frame, and there's particular controls and particular procedures that we test and go through. So each one is getting validated through about 2 or 3 processes, from the information owner to the system administrator and the MSSP.
And we're not exclusively relying on the human element here. It's the additional element. So
Yes.
we have the automated scans and the automated malicious code remediations. And then beyond that, to Edgar's point, we're also running these maintenance tasks that are on a recurring basis via our ticketing systems to make sure that we're logging those effectively. And if there's ever an issue, that a human's going to see it on the weekly, monthly, semi-annual, quarterly, et cetera, maintenance tasks.
Yep. And if there is an incident, it's pulled, it's stopped, it's logged, and it sends out a generated alert to myself, senior leadership, and the infrastructure technician to pull that device itself.
Excellent. All right, folks, that is how it's done. Let's give Edgar and Evan a round of applause virtually. I think they did a phenomenal job. Clearly, they took this role playing very seriously, and it's highly impressive. And the great thing about it is they've created a template that I can use and share with future players to make it easier for you all to step in this role, and it won't be so intimidating. Yeah, just have fun with it. They didn't like they were sweating or anything. They were having a good time. It was role playing. There really are no wrong answers. I really appreciate that. Evan Negger, can you quickly share how to get in contact with you if they want to learn more about it?
I would like to answer Gene's question.
Okay.
before. Do this annually, quarterly patching needs to be documented? Yes. So it's best to plan so you don't plan to fail. So you have a checklist of everything that you're covering and all your major checks that will happen at those particular intervals would be documented.
Yep. It's a classic do what you say what you do scenario. They're going to want to see everything that you say that you did.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So
And don't forget, you got to keep it for 6 years.
How can the people get in touch with you?
I can be in touch through LinkedIn. I can provide my link and Derek can share it out to y'all.
You, Evan?
Yep. Y'all can get in touch with me via LinkedIn as well. Also, if you visit www.northstarstrategies.work, you can get in touch with me there. I would love to talk with anybody further about this process for your organization or for your MSP, because they might need support in that area too. So thanks y'all for joining today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Clearly, Evan and Edgar know what they're talking about. And I know it may be a little intimidating. They set the bar high, but you don't have to have their level of expertise to play. But yeah, they really did a wonderful job. Thank you very much. And I forgot to mention Edgar. He's a 2-time player. He played last week. He was in the hot seat. Well, he was the one actually doing the assessing. So you can come back and play as much as you want. So thanks again for that, Edgar. As I promised, our bonus for you all attending today is Inspire Cyber created what we call compliance story for CMMC level 1, where it goes through a role play and essentially kind of gives examples of how the questions the assessor asks, how the OSA responds, and different type of tools they're using. So I put the link in the chat. You just go to that link and you're able to access that document. And ultimately, I'll end up adding the resources that Edgar and Evan created for this mock assessment in there as well. Yep, there we go. And then let's see. We got one more question. Say, can you use commercial cloud for FCI? Yes, you can. Receive FCI via email or store FCI? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. For FCI, for level 1, federal contract information, you can use commercial clouds like a Microsoft commercial, for example, but not for CUI. So that's what trips up a lot of contractors. For DoD with CUI, DFAR 7012 clearly outlines they have to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent, and Microsoft 365 commercial is not FedRAMP moderate. They no longer advertise that, and they clearly say they are not authorized to store CUI. So, all right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this how it's done. I had a lot of fun. Even I was multitasking, played a lot of roles. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Any last words, Edgar and Evan, before we let the people go? I wish you all happy holidays. Great way to just in the work week, having some fun.
Thank you all for joining. And, I just wanted to call out, yes, Edgar and I prepared quite a bit for this, but largely, if you find yourself in a scenario where you feel intimidated by a scenario like this, just lean in, because one has to go through a process like this to understand where your weaknesses are and where you can grow. So I would encourage anybody to not use Edgar and my performance or presentation as a reason not to pursue it. Hopefully it inspires you to pursue something like this and to get in the mix. So just really thank you all for joining. And Derek, thank you for organizing this. Edgar, thank you for taking it seriously with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yep. All I have to say is just fail forward. I failed my first assessment and I didn't like to be checked. So I had to level up really quick.
Level up. Yeah, I like that. Level up. And I invite y'all to visit cmmcproof.com. We have a 7-day trial if you're looking to start your gap assessment. So yeah, certainly check that out. Other than that, yeah, we all can be reached on LinkedIn, email. Always happy to help. Thank you all. Happy holidays.
All right. Bye, y'all.